ladies. Today we're going to talk about the Russian Revolution again. We're looking at the causes, what started it. And little does he know that Nicholas II there, he will be the last Tsar of Russia. So, he's the last of the Romanov dynasty. That was his wife with him, the Tsarina Alexandra. What we are looking at today. We are trying to figure out how each one of the following events is going to help lead to this Russian Revolution and cause it to start. So we're going to start with the Russo-Japanese War, move into Bloody Sunday, the Revolution of 1905, and then World War I, which we have already looked at, but we do want to look at the Russian perspective a bit today. So if you need to pause it because you need time, please go ahead and do so now. These are the things that you have to be able to explain to me have helped cause this Russian Revolution. The Russo-Japanese War, Bloody Sunday, Revolution of 1905, and World War I. Okay? So, based on this, we've already talked about the Russo-Japanese War and World War I. Bloody Sunday and the Revolution of 1905 are actually very specific to Russia, so we will cover those a little bit more in depth. It might seem like I go fast through the others, but that's because we've done them. So, what we want to look at first is the Russo-Japanese War. As you already know, the Russo-Japanese War was between Russia and Japan, right? And Russia and Japan were competing not over their own territory, but actually the territory of China and Manchuria. Russia wanted it, Japan wanted it. And so those two obviously cannot both have it, and so we do have a conflict erupt over it. So Tsar Nicholas II is the Tsar of Russia at the time. He is competing with the Japanese because both want to expand into China. That should make you understand that this ties into imperialism and imperialist conquest. So Russia and Japan both wanting to expand again. Pause it if you think you'll need help. But the area of China that they're looking to take is Manchuria. We already discussed this war and the fact that Japan emerges victorious, which elevates Japanese status among the world powers, but Russia is defeated, which makes Russia humiliated and look weak. And so the Russian people start to lose their faith in their Tsar, like, what is going on, that we were defeated by this. And remember the attitudes at the time, that Japan and the other Asian countries are somehow beneath the Europeans. So this is something that is viewed with extreme humiliation and frustration by the Russian people. And so they start to lose their faith in the Tsar, and they call the Tsar little father. So it's like losing your faith in your dad. You know, that this is the person who's supposed to take care of you and is making these terrible mistakes that make you look weak and ridiculous. And so, we have the Russo-Japanese War playing into the Russian Rev here. Now, I'm going to show you a few pictures. We were just talking a little bit about the racial attitudes at the time, so I'd like you to take a look at this propaganda poster. You've got the Russian general fully clothed in a uniform fighting against the Japanese, and the Japanese is won. And notice how the Japanese soldier is depicted there. Shows you again some of that racial attitude. Russia at war with Japan. This is again a U.S. newspaper directly from the time, kind of showing you, putting you back in the context of history. So this news is obviously going to be reported throughout countries all over the world, making Russia lose that much more face. So think about that aspect of it as well. Next, people are already kind of losing their faith in their Tsar with the defeat at the hands of the Japanese. So what starts to happen is you start to have the laborers in the cities, the people who are working in the cities, primarily in factories, which are not extremely productive factories and haven't industrialized to the point of the other European nations. But they start wanting to go on strike. And so you have this priest, Father Gapone, who decides, I'm going to write up a petition and bring it to the Tsar, and pause this, by the way, and explain to him what our problems are and what kind of help we need from him. And so he has all these followers. He himself is a union leader in the country, so he represents workers as well. And they're going and marching to the Tsar's palace, where he actually isn't. From further away, he actually tells his army to handle it, take care of this. And so the army opens fire on this innocent group of people, killing several hundred. 1,100 is a pretty high estimate. This is really going to lead to people really starting to say, that's it, the Tsar is just not working for us. He's terrible. This is, Grandma went on this march to try to get his help and tell him what her problems were and, met a bullet. Now, whether or not the people fully understood that the Tsar was just not very clear with his military and his guards, and that he wasn't even at the palace, that's different. But you have to look at both perspectives. So here is an artist's rendering of Bloody Sunday. You can see these people putting their hands up. They have no weapons. They're carrying religious icons and rosary beads, and they're fired upon. So people are going to really start to question the Tsar and what his true motivations are and how he really is going to deal with his people. Is he going to take care of them, or is he going to ignore their needs and allow them to live in poverty and pain? So understandably, Bloody Sunday upsets a lot of people, and it directly leads to more striking throughout the country, and it leads to this revolution of 1905. In the revolution of 1905, again, because of Bloody Sunday in large part, the workers go on strike all around the country. The peasants in the countrysides actually start going into the homes of the wealthy landowners and killing them and taking possession of the land. I mean, they literally start trying to grab land. You can pause it here just in case you need more time. But you also, remember we talked about there were too many nationalities and the idea of nationalism coming into play, and it does through the Poles and the Georgians, who are each going to demand their autonomy, meaning the right to rule themselves. You also have terrorists start to assassinate government officials, and this actually becomes interesting too because it's a tactic taken from some men from the late 1800s, one of which was Ulanov, that is Vladimir Lenin's brother. And his brother was hanged when he was a young man for going against the Tsar, and Lenin, we're going to see, is going to be a little revolutionary himself. However, he will not meet that same fate. So, the Revolution of 1905, again, an offspring of Bloody Sunday and this perceived failure by the Tsar to react to people's problems. 1905 Russian Rev, again, you see a depiction here, people rioting in the streets, screaming, meeting, protesting, and the like. Here we see some more of the 1905 protesting, where they're literally in front of the government buildings and filling the streets and having marches and protests and loudness. Now, here is our Nicholas and his wife Alexandra. Alexandra was German. The Tsar himself, they just weren't good rulers. He was relatively weak, and he relied on her counsel quite a bit, and she was very out of touch with the Russian people. And the Russian people didn't like her, in large part because she was German, but also because a woman's role is not to rule her husband in that traditional society, and so she's viewed with some contempt by the Russian people. What the Tsar does, he realizes the revolution in 1905 was out of control and that he really has to do something to try to sate the people and keep them quiet. So he sets up what's called a Duma, and a Duma is an elected national legislature, equate it to our House of Representatives. What this does is it gives the people the sense that they are electing their officials and that people are representing them. So it allows our Nicholas II to stay in power. Pause it, by the way, if you need. But it allows him to stay in power, and that's great for him. However, it doesn't quell all of the distrust and the anger that the workers and the peasants have. He is able to form a Duma, and then he dissolves the Duma when it's doing things he doesn't want it to do. And then he forms a new Duma. So really, do the people have that much say? And they start to realize. But still, for the next 9 years, until 1914, Russia is still an autocracy. You still have Tsar Nicholas II in power, still running things, still taking care of day-to-day business in Russia. The problem for him is going to be made even worse when World War I breaks out. So once we have the outbreak of World War I, we talked a little bit about this during the topic itself of World War I, but the Russian army was ill-equipped. They were not ready to fight this war. They did not have the weapons. They did not have the armaments, the things that they needed to fight this war. The organization, the strong leadership in the military, and the government were severely lacking there. And so World War I is going to drive things to the breaking point for Russia. What makes this worse? Alexandra urges her husband to go to the front because what he had done was tried to, and you can pause it to write, But what he had done was to try to put one of his cousins in power, and she felt that that could threaten his power if he did too well. So she said, "You go." Alexandra stays behind, and she's in charge, but the people don't trust her. Alexandra and Nicholas had a son, Alexei, who was a hemophiliac, and this is, in large part because of the interbreeding and all that between the royalty. But he has this bleeding disorder where where the blood doesn't stop, and so something simple can be really catastrophic for him. He could even die. The only person who seems to be able to help him is a monk named Rasputin, who himself is incredibly corrupt and incredibly disliked by the people. So Rasputin seems to wield this power over the Tsarina, and not only are the people angry about it, but so are the noblemen and the officials of Russia. And they're going to say, this is not acceptable. He, for a monk, is not too holy, all right? He is known as a womanizer. He drinks, he gambles. He does all of the things that you would not expect a monk or a holy man to do. Now, the Russian military, again, this is showing you, this is Manchuria, again, the Manchurian, but this is showing you the Russian army, and they're just poorly equipped. This is our Nicholas at the front, eating with his troops, dining with his troops, but he's a very, very disorganized leader. So the conditions, and you see military men laying on the back, they don't have a weapon. They're waiting to see if anybody dies to grab a weapon. So the Russian military is very poorly equipped. Sometimes men were even sent into battle without a weapon and just bullets. And they were expected to find and forage for a weapon as they went. So the strains that this is putting on the Russian military. Then at home, this is from the home front. These women are now left here. They are in, a difficult climate to begin with, have to take care of their children, have to take over the jobs of their husbands, and they have no real way to make money. And so the conditions there are getting worse and worse and worse. And so World War I put all of these strains on Russia that it simply could not handle anymore. And that's when you're going to see the time is right for this revolution to begin. So these are the events and causes leading up to the Russian Revolution. We'll talk more and investigate these more in class. Have a good day.